Welcome to the Fit Dad Nation podcast, forging strong fathers and raising a stronger generation. It's time to get up, man up, or shut up with your host, Steve Roy.
Hey guys, this is Steve Roy, host of the Fit Dad Nation podcast, and today I have with me Dr. Marc Cesari. Marc is a doctor of chiropractic, a certified strength and conditioning specialist. He's a provider of active release techniques and holds certifications in Graston, dry needling, and fascial stretch therapy. He's also the official chiropractor for Towson University Athletics, as well as a chiropractor for the PGA Tour. So in short, he is a movement specialist. Dr. Cesari, thank you so much for joining us.
Steve, thank you very much. It's nice to be talking with you here this evening. So,
yeah, absolutely.
And please call me Marc.
Okay, yep. Sure thing. You got it. So actually, I was introduced to you from a good client of mine. He's become a good friend, and his girlfriend, I guess, had seen you as her chiropractor and had some great things to say. So I said, what a great person to reach out to. So thank you so much for your time here.
No problem. Hopefully I can shed some light on just how to keep everybody moving. You know, we're all busy. And if we can keep you moving throughout the day and address the minimal amount of time we have, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe just in a couple minutes here, maybe just tell us a little bit more about yourself, kind of what you do, why you're doing it, and what you've seen happen through this whole movement of trying to move better.
Sure. So I grew up as an athlete, and when I was 14, I had some back pain, and I went to everybody, and they couldn't get me better. Medical professionals all help, but it wasn't addressing my issue. So I went to a physical therapist. I tried to do some strengthening stuff. Finally, I went to this chiropractor who used his hands to get me better. And I had pain for 2 months at 14 years old. And when you get 50% better with someone with their hands on you in 1 week, I think this is pretty sweet. Always wanted to stay in the sports world and arena and just stay active and fit. And, I said at one point, let's go to chiropractic school. And, I'm a manual therapist, what it comes down to. And I try and blend in strength training and personal training, getting people move better. And I just wanted to go, how many people are out there that were like me, that had nowhere to go, that don't want medications and surgery and injections? And, this is kind of a place that I found that's very similar to physical therapy. And, you just find your niche of people you want to work with. I want to work with people that want to stay healthy and happy and move better. So that's kind of the direction I've gone. I've been in practice for 13, 14 years, and I just blend it all together depending on what people need.
Sure. I mean, I'm just so fascinated by it. And honestly, it's probably one of the things I struggle with most. And I think a lot of dads my age, I'm 46, struggle with is, we just don't move well. And it's just obviously a result of sedentary lifestyles. You drive a lot, you sit at a desk all day long for years and years and years. And before long, your head's coming forward, your shoulders are rolling, your back hurts, your hamstrings are super tight. And it's just like one big ball. And then you don't feel good. And it's something I struggle with as well. And I do this for a living, and I still struggle with it.
Yep. Yeah, I explain to my patients that, we just get toxic. We were meant to move from an evolutionary process. We haven't changed very much. So we're meant to move. There's a bunch of people that talk about us hunting and gathering, but what do we do for a life? Well, most of us sit. And then if we sit 40 hours a week and we don't do stuff to counteract the forces of sitting, the scale steams in that lopsided configuration. So I really encourage people, move throughout the day, counteract the forces of sitting, and just, we build up toxicity. So if we can do some flexibility, do some mobility, counteract those forces of sitting and just being static, oftentimes that's all we need to do. And then we just, your lifestyle and what you want to do, and blend in strength training for being able to mulch, or being able to lift your kids up, or being able to work out, do a half marathon. Everybody has different goals, but and different values, but we just need to cater it towards that way. So I work at it from a therapist standpoint, and then we work well with you, and you kind of get to the place where we get men and women to do what they want to do.
Sure. What are some of the most common things that you see in your patients? I mean, is there a recurring theme? Obviously, where a lot of us are living these same type of lives.
Yeah.
What are some of the main issues, tight muscles or injuries or those types of things that result of this lifestyle that we're living?
Yep. So the most common things I see in practice, and I'm sure low back pain, I think, is the second most common thing to the common cold visit to the ER. People just don't know what to do. But you have low back pain and neck pain, and those typically will occur from sitting or excessive poor posture. What ends up happening with that is something called upper cross syndrome. So if you type that in on the internet, you'll see all sorts of stuff, but you end up getting what are called tight hip flexors. Your hamstrings might tighten up, which are the back of your legs. Your chest will tighten up. The back of your neck will tighten up. And then we try and work with those tight areas, and it just creates another problem because it just feeds the beast. So, and typically it causes weakness in other places. So, that's most of my majority of stuff. And then the other things are, so a lot of this stuff is really self-inducing and just the lack of motion and mobility throughout our life.
Sure. So you obviously probably run through some kind of assessment, have them do certain movements or stand a certain way. And, without that, so, for the average guy that isn't going to go see someone like you, what's something that they can do to kind of self-assess? I mean, yes, my neck hurts, my back hurts, sure. But, they don't, most people don't know what to do, how to truly assess it. And then other than maybe, Googling it or looking on YouTube, they don't really know how to correct it.
Yeah. And that's a whole animal to discuss, but you can do just a daily, what I call a daily audit of how well you move. And on the days that you're good, simple things, lean forward and try and touch your toes, see where you come, see where you fall down, and then arms overhead and leaning backwards. And this is all standing, twist completely to the right, twist completely to the left. And you go, do I have pain or is it just tightness? And do I feel good that day? And on that day, if you feel good, then you can kind of use that as your baseline of feeling good and do it every day and see where you fall. And then if you do have extra tightness or discomfort, you go, well, what was I doing the day before? And then you can kind of backtrack and maybe figure out where that tightness or irritation was coming from. And that's the biggest thing. If we can figure out where it's coming from, which is the why, then we have a good idea of how to treat it. So the second part, I think you talked about, areas that are tight and things that are weak. Like, how do we address those? For lack of just to not get complex, things that are tight, you often will stretch. Things that are really weak, that you feel like you just struggle with, we just do some strength training, and that's where you come in, Steve, to try and help out with that stuff and assist us. So you can foam roll for tightness. You can also do some strength training for tightness. And people have, for example, people come in and they constantly have hamstring tightness. Well, tightness means different things. Is it like the tissues are really scar tissue and adhesed and limited and tight and you can't get to the range you want to? Or do you have a good range of motion and they just feel tight? Those are two different things. The second one is a reflex, where you just do some foam rolling maybe and you get some blood flow to those tissues and all of a sudden it opens up. Then the first thing is we've got scar tissue and glue in there. You need to do some stuff actively to work on breaking up that scar tissue to get to a new range to do what you want to do.
Sure. So, most people, and I think what you're talking about is one of the things is using a foam roller to break up those the adhesions in the soft muscle tissue. But so the idea for most guys, in my experience, is 5 minutes of foam rolling, if they're lucky, before a workout. And then they think that's it. So first of all, foam rollers came on the scene, 10, 15 years ago. And it was, all the rage. And then, recent, quote unquote research has said, oh, no, foam rolling is bad now. It's hurting you. And you definitely shouldn't roll the IT bands like they told you a while ago. So what's your stance on foam rolling? Do we have to use the rumble roller that basically just digs right into your skin? Like, there's so many different rollers is it just marketing, or it's crazy?
Sure. Yep. So foam rolling and, you put things there. So foam rolling, I think when we have stuff, you want to get blood flow to those things. So I call foam rolling meat tenderizing. we don't, first and foremost, when we warm up, we want to warm up to be able to prepare for what we want to do. So even if you just do some jumping jacks for a minute and that gets your heart rate up and that gets blood flow to everything, or a quick jog for 5 minutes, I think that's a great way to start before you foam roll. Then you're getting blood flow to all these tissues and you're seeing what's still tight. Then if you want to foam roll, you do about 10 or 15 passes on the area that you're tight. You want to put a pressure that feels a little painful, but I don't think anything that's real significant, because you need to put enough pressure, but not enough that it creates a fight or flight response where your body reactively tenses up. Mm-hmm. Do you need fancy ones? There are collegiate teams that type. So I think the purpose of you don't need to spend an extra $20 or $30 for the little nubs. If you want to get to more specific things, you can use a lacrosse ball and proceed with caution, but start off with a foam roller, start off with simplicity and see if it makes a difference. See if it changes the way you move. So we talked about that daily audit. Maybe you find an area that's tight. Maybe you warm up for 5 minutes, do some foam rolling because we want to do the minimal amount to prepare for our activity. Then you retest that range of motion and see if it changes. If it does, it's the minimal effective dose to make a difference, and we're money. But I think a lot of people really foam roll way too aggressively. And if you foam roll and it doesn't change, maybe you go to a practitioner, physical therapist, strength coach that's very, very knowledgeable and stuff, or a chiropractor that knows how to assess movement so that you can get to the one thing that opens everything up and makes you feel that much more loose. So sometimes you just need a little bit of direction and it makes a huge difference. But hopefully that answers your question on foam rollers and where to invest money and where not to.
Yeah, sure. Specifically the IT band, that's one that, as you know, every guy that I ever put on a foam roller, regardless of how soft it was, screams in agony the first time they do it. And I've had, clients that are still in pain after 2 months of using it on their IT bands regularly. So, I started to question, should we really be rolling this? And, like I said, I've read some things that now say no IT band. So what is your stance on the IT band?
So evidence shows that the IT band doesn't really move tons relative. It doesn't move that much, or does it get too much scar tissue? If you look at the anatomy book, it lays right along the side of one of your quadriceps muscles, your vastus lateralis. Mm-hmm. And so when you foam roll, really oftentimes you're just mashing a sensitive quad muscle. And oftentimes I don't see IT bands too tight on everyday Joes. If anything, they have some back tightness that they forget to tell you. All of a sudden, if you open up the low back and do some foam rolling in your back and in the lower flank, that IT band tightness seems to settle down moderately. It can very well be mistaken with some low back pain that gets referred down. And referred pain is just a pain that travels from an area where the main problem, and that outside of your thigh is often a big place for that. So maybe that's why you foam roll and all of a sudden you're like, it doesn't really make a difference. So that's the answer. I don't give tons of it because it's not the root cause of the problem most times.
Okay. All right. Makes sense.
Yep.
Makes sense. Sure. Yep. So I'm going to ask you something specific, and I think this is for me actually personally, but I know a bunch of guys will have the same issue. So, I spent 11 years desk job, staring at a computer, I spent an hour and a half, 2 hours each way commuting for a long time. And so I've struggled with upper cross, and I'm actually have it in my show notes here that I wanted to ask you specifically about that, and you already mentioned it. So basically, for those that don't know, there's some weak muscles and tight muscles throughout the neck, and then tight pec muscles that are causing some issues there. So for me, I do a ton of exercises I believe or I think are helping me, and I still struggle with keeping my posture up. My neck hurts from time to time, more than I would like. And I have to really, it's constant focus to bring my shoulders back, to tuck my chin to like a double chin. But, what are a few things that you would say are at the top of the list for correcting someone that has that jutted head forward where, those neck muscles are tight or weak, and don't have probably a lot of strength up in the the rear delts and the rhomboids and the maybe the traps.
Yeah, that's a great question, Steve. So I would put you in a category of a mobile desk jockey.
Yep.
You're sitting in your car, which is just your office. So there's upper cross and lower cross syndrome. If you start off with the foundation in your low back, that's with a good back support. So if you have a mesh backrest or you type in back support, you can put that in your low back, which gives you a good low back curve, which carries up the chain where you actually have decent upper back posture, and then your neck won't jump forward. So I start people off by getting a backrest or taking a throw pillow at their house and throw it in their back and sit with good posture, actually make use of that back support in a chair, maybe at your desk, or the lumbar support in your car. Then that won't take your shoulders and round them forward and your neck jutting. So, and then once that occurs, you can do some stuff to counteract those forces. So let's start off with the low back. You can stretch what are called your hip flexors. If you type in a hip flexor stretch, which is in the front of your body, and it brings your knee behind you, you can stretch that throughout the day. A simple exercise of just putting your hands on your back, standing up and leaning backwards. I think there was a study that showed 100 people that had back pain. And if everybody put their hands on their back and leaned backwards 15 times, 4 or 5 times a day, 60 or 70% pain went away. So it's a pretty significant amount. And then for upper back and neck, chest or your pecs, you can do what are called neck retractions. If you type those in on the internet, you pretty much take your fingers, you put them on your chin, and you do a chin tuck. And then you can also strengthen what are called the muscles between your shoulder blades, which are your rhomboids, and just get those to fire. Sometimes that'll tip the scale and get you to a place of where you feel better. Steve, I want to make a clarification that posture is, I don't think it's necessarily dreadful and awful. It only becomes a situation when it becomes a situation, meaning if you run a marathon and you're exhausted, an efficient way for us to not use energy, which is what our body does, is to sit for a while and slouch. But excessive amounts of that, so if you just sit all day, that can create that tension and tightness. So you have to work on good posture, and I call it to build up frequent flyer miles, or to stretch to build up frequent flyer miles so that you don't put load to your neck in the wrong place or your low back. That's when we run into the issue. So all those things I mentioned to stretch, you stretch. The little things to strengthen, you strengthen. You work on your posture. That should be a decent recipe, and see if your symptoms change.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. I want to get into something here real quick too, if you don't mind, because I see you hold certifications in something called Graston, which I had to Google because I didn't know what it was. So it's that bar that I've been seeing. I've been seeing it online. Like it's like this metal bar that people are looks like they're just torquing down on people's bodies. It looks painful, but I'm sure it's probably not. But so it's that dry needling and the fascial stretch therapy. So first off, there's a fair amount of people out there that turn their nose up and think that a lot of the stuff is not real science. I mean, there are obviously people that think that chiropractors are, quacks. I mean, I think that's kind of crazy, but obviously you've heard that before. So, I'm curious to hear, some of these kind of non-traditional modalities or things that you're using to help people other than your typical, foam roller ball type of thing. So can you tell us a little bit about, the Graston and dry needling and the stretch therapy?
Yeah. So a lot of physical therapists and a lot of chiropractors that focus on their specialty is manual therapy will do a lot of these things. There's research that has been coming out over the last 15 years on physical therapy and chiropractic care that shows that it works. The reason why it was called quackery, or it was just something that was different, is because there wasn't tons of research on it. So old school primary care providers and PCPs would say, well, don't do that. That's not a good alternative for care. Why don't you just put some ice on it, take some medication, and rest? The evidence is showing now that we've got some good education and good research supporting this stuff. So sometimes, I think we become the experts we're primary spine care providers. So what is our options? Our stuff is manual medication. And the goal when you have an injury, the natural healing process is to get blood flow to things. So if we have a tight muscle, let's do some foam rolling. Maybe we try something called Graston, which is a very specific maybe foam roller that gets blood flow to the area. Dry needling, you put a needle into a muscle to create a puncture wound to create a blood flow response. If you bring blood flow to a tissue, you bring oxygen, nutrients, you stimulate the healing process. And then if you don't piss the tissue off by doing something that causes the problem, all of a sudden your body naturally heals. So that's what Graston is. That's what dry needling is. Active release is a form of myofascial release. And these are fancy terms for people that do manual care. You might even find some of this stuff with massage therapists. And fascial stretch therapy is just another alternative where we work on the body and we open up tissues. Blood flow to those things, which you get blood flow. Oftentimes the body likes it. It restores range of motion. It decreases tightness. If we can get you to move better, you can recover faster and do things that you want to do. So that gives a little history of why we were thought to be quacks. And then all of a sudden, there's a lot of research coming out about it. And, if you find a good one in your area or a good couple providers, and they look like they have a good website, they have some good certifications, and they're just realistic on how to get you better. They don't sign you up with a treatment plan for 8 or 10 weeks if it's not a big issue. Try them out. Give them 3 or 4 visits. A good provider is going to move mountains and make you feel better in 3 or 4 visits, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be something. So, I mean, I'm very open-minded when it comes to these types of things, but also a skeptic. So, when I hear about this stuff, I want to, learn as much as I can about it. But, one thing that happened recently, and I'll just share this real quick, is my physical therapist, who, he's got a doctorate in physical therapy. I mean, he's a well-educated guy. He suggested that I go get something called a Zyto scan. So, my girlfriend goes to him too. I read about it and I said, nah, I don't think so. And she said, well, I'm going to do it. So she went up, drove an hour to this woman, and basically, the Zyto scan, you stick your hand in this little contraption scanner and it's supposed to read the electrical impulses in your body and tell you what kind of nutrients and vitamins and minerals, trace minerals that you're deficient in, which, obviously makes no sense from a scientific standpoint. I mean, it's just insane. I mean, this makes no sense. But, I didn't want to burst her bubble. She did it.
Sure.
And she came home with, 4 different overpriced supplements that she didn't need, which is the whole purpose of why I'm sure they have these things, right? So they can sell you these supplements. You have to have it. So when she told me that this therapist told her while they were in the session, she said, well, next time you go to the grocery store and go over to the aisle with all the supplements and the vitamins and stuff, and if your body naturally leans towards, a B vitamin or whatever, that means your body's deficient. And I'm thinking, what? That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But people actually believe this stuff. And I mean, and I told her before she went, this is kind of crazy, but, she still went and spent $100 on stuff she didn't necessarily need. But so, that gets lumped in with, some other stuff that, is out there. So that's why I wanted to clarify that. I mean, the stuff that you're doing, sounds legit. I've seen it all over the place, but, there's just so much ridiculous stuff out there. So,
and I mean, everything works, but everything doesn't work for everyone and everything. You need a baseline to measure, and that's the toughest thing in our profession. Even with nutrition, there's so many, coffee's great for you one year, and then the next year it's not. So, you just got to see the consistency, or I look for the patterns of the trends of things that are good, things that aren't good. We all know you have packaged stuff, it's not going to be good for you if you're trying to make gains. But, so I can go on about the nutritional stuff for some time, but
sure.
Yeah, that might be a whole discussion to itself.
Yeah, I'm sure. So just a couple more things I wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
Obviously, everywhere you look now, even at Target, Walmart, every, Dick's Sporting Goods, wherever, there are countless, balls, rollers, bands, bars, everything that's designed to help us, with mobility or flexibility. So, in your opinion, are these just companies looking to capitalize on the hot trend of mobility or not, or what's worth using and what's basically just a waste?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're busy, you should be focusing on, trying to do some kind of strength training or stuff and have enough strength to do what you want to do in life. 3 or 4 days a week. If you have access to a gym, they'll have all the toys. Stuff at home, get a foam roller, get some lacrosse balls, some stuff that you can do some some soft tissue work, which includes muscles, tendons, ligaments for yourself, get a pull-up bar. All you need is, a TRX system is pretty cheap. For $200, you can do a lot of stuff with that, and you can get some weights, and that's pretty good. Some of the stuff like ab mats and things like that, that's not the way we were meant to move. If you do big enough complex movements, you should be getting your core work. You don't need extra toys or bells and whistles. I preach to my patients that are like, well, what do I need to do? I don't have enough. I can't afford a trainer. I talk about 9 things that I found in commonalities. We push things, we pull things, we deadlift and pick up from the ground, we squat, we do lunges, we carry stuff, we do some either walk, running, we might crawl on the ground, or we do some twisting motions. Those are 9 basic things that I think you should be doing during the week, and figure out the weights that you want to do. So if you have a 50-year-old, you should be lifting that stuff so that it's not a shock to your system when you do. But those are complex movements where I don't think you do tons of core work. If you do all those, I think you should be a pretty happy camper, and you can do a lot of that stuff at home.
Yeah, I mean, I agree the exact. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think the exact same way. But when I asked you that question, what I was referring to specifically was all of the mobility stuff. The whole shelf that's lined with the fancy balls, bars, bands that are all geared to sell you something that's supposed to help you with moving better. So what are the couple things that you would say are at the top of the list for purchases for moving better?
Yep. Band work will work great. Swiss balls and exercise balls, I think, are perfectly good. You can do some great things with the balls. But other than that, there's a lot of stuff out there. And I just went into Dick's today and looked at some stuff. And, a trigger point device and doohickey is the same as another one. The purpose is to get blood flow to it. If you want to spend an extra $30, $40 on something that looks great, phenomenal. But yeah, I mean, I wish I could say they all work. I guess I got to try them. But once again, foam roll, tennis ball, lacrosse ball, anything that you feel works really well. There's not exercise bands are a great alternative for dumbbells and weights if you don't have those. So you can attach them to little anchors and down in your basement and get some good mobility work. But that's what I would say. I wish I could say it's more sophisticated, but it's just you put those things in a bucket and that's what it is.
Simple is okay. Yeah. Right. Let me ask you just one more question.
Sure.
So most of the guys listening here are probably in their 30s and 40s. And as I mentioned before, not probably wanting to spend or don't feel like they have the time to spend on mobility work and flexibility work. And plus, I mean, guys, for the most part, they want to lift heavy stuff and they don't, necessarily want to do the non-sexy stuff like isometric holds and slow stretching and the stuff that just is boring. And for me too, I mean, I think it's incredibly boring. So I struggle with that as well. But I mean, in your expertise, what would you say are maybe the best 3 or 4 things, that we can do kind of to maximize our time and get the most bang for our buck when it comes to moving better? Let's say we have 10 minutes, 4 days a week to do something. What would it be?
You just get moving. Go for a run. Do some jumping jacks. Just get that blood flow going. And then start to, oh man, I lost my thought on stuff. But start to move better and just start to, and do the things that you want to do. So one of the things that maybe this is a progressive idea, but have you guys ever noticed that you stretch like your hamstrings the next day they're the same length? Well, maybe it's because it's just a reflex that you're working on. If you truly want to get an increase in range of motion of the tissues, I've been told that you need to put a force to it, which means you put a load to it. So if I want to increase my hamstring length, which I think we have a chronic history of issue in our society, not hamstring tightness, but hamstring weakness because we don't know where they are, how to use them. Actually, I would say do a deadlift, a Romanian deadlift. And then you're putting a force to your tissues while you lean over and lengthen the tissue. If your brain can control that, all of a sudden the brain goes, you want me to keep this open on a regular basis. Next thing you know, You start to have normal hamstring length for what you need to do. And range of motion is relative. People go, well, my hamstrings are tight. I'm like, yeah, but they're flexible enough for what you want to do. So things need to be flexible or mobile enough to do what you want to do. If you never put your arm over your head, I don't see why it's useful to stretch my arm over my head. That's not realistic, but I think that's what we need to do. But before we start stretching, make sure you get some blood flow, get your heart rate going, get some blood flow to all these tissues that you're going to be working. And then if you play soccer as a dad in mid-30s, get to the positions that you're going to be getting to on the soccer field because you're not going to think about it. And just start moving through those places, whether it's front lunges and side lunges, go for a jog. Those little things will help out. Sometimes they're not specific stretches. It's just getting moving, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. I appreciate it. Yeah,
hey, no
good
problem.
stuff. And I could talk to you all day about this stuff, but for the sake of time, I want to wrap this up. Yep. And I want to thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Hopefully, we'll be able to connect further here pretty soon.
Yep. Feelings likewise. If I can offer some expertise on this stuff, I've been working at it over the last 10 years to 10 plus years to try and find the simplest things to keep us moving because we're all busy. So if anybody needs to get a hold of me, you can always email me at drc@back2ultimatehealth.com. And that's Dr. DRC. And I'm not too much on social media, but my Twitter handle is at Dr. Cesari, or at drhands.com, at drhands20. And
okay.
Yeah, that's about it. Feel free to anybody that's affiliated with you, shoot me an email, reach out to me on Twitter, and let's have a discussion about some stuff that you might be having issues with.
Perfect. Cool. Thank you. And remember, dads, if you aren't taking care of yourself first and learning to move better, certainly part of that, then you can't take care of your family the best way possible. Thanks for listening. I appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Have a great night.
Thanks for joining us. And remember, if you want more information, check out the Fit Dad Basecamp group on Facebook. And don't forget to stop by fitdadnation.com. Until next time, keep kicking ass and taking the next step. You can do this, Dad.